Tonight, our Old Testament lesson comes from 2 Kings 5, verses 1 through 14. It's the story of Naaman. You probably heard about him when you were a child, but listen again and think about him from an adult perspective. Naaman, commander of the army of the king of Aram, was a great man and in high favor with his master, because by him the Lord had given victory to Aram. The man, though a mighty warrior, suffered from leprosy. Now the Arameans, on one of their raids, had taken a young girl captive from the land of Israel, and she now served Naaman's wife. She said to her mistress, "If only my lord were with the prophet who's in Samaria, he would cure him of his leprosy." So Naaman went in and told his lord just what the girl from the land of Israel had said. And the king of Aram said, "Go then, and I will send along a letter to the king of Israel." So he went, taking with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 sets of garments. He brought the letter to the king of Israel, which read, "When this letter reaches you, know that I have sent to you my servant Naaman, that you may cure him of his leprosy." When the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his clothes and said, "Am I God to give death or life, that this man sends me word to me to cure a man of his leprosy? Just look and see how he's trying to pick a quarrel with me." But when Elisha, the man of God, heard about it, that the king of Israel had torn his clothes, he sent a message to the king. "Why have you torn your clothes? Let him come to me, that he may learn that there is a prophet in Israel." So Naaman came with his horses and his chariots and halted at the entrance of Elisha's house. Elisha sent a messenger to him, saying, "Go, wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh shall be restored, and you shall be clean." But Naaman became angry and went away, saying, "I thought that for me he would surely come out and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God, and would wave his hand over the spot and cure the leprosy. Are not Abana and Parphar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Could I not wash in them and be clean?" So he turned and went away in a rage. But his servants approached him and said to him, "Father, if the prophet had commanded you to do something difficult, would you not have done it? How much more when all he said to you was, 'Wash and be clean'?" So he went down and immersed himself 7 times in the Jordan, according to the word of the man of God. And his flesh was restored like the flesh of a young boy. He was clean. This is the word of the Lord for us, and we say, thanks be to God. Tonight we're going to think about what we could learn from Naaman. Who's in this story? Well, first there's Naaman, the great warrior. Then there are 2 kings, one who was upset so much that he tore his clothes as if he were grieving a great loss. There's Elisha, the man of God. I think he was probably a bit of a wild man, like his mentor, Elijah. Who did I leave out? Well, Naaman's wife, but she doesn't even get a speaking part in this little drama, and the servants. Without the servants, there'd be no story, no cure, no happy ending, nothing remembered. And this story was remembered through the centuries. Jesus knew that this story was so familiar that he could refer to it when he preached for the first time in his hometown of Nazareth. He said, "Now there were many lepers in Israel at the time of the prophet Elisha." Jesus said, "But none of them was cleansed except Naaman, the Syrian." Just so you know, the land the Hebrews called Aram, the Greeks called Syria. It's the same place. Jesus didn't mention the servants in his sermon, but he wouldn't have known this story without them, nor would we. The story does begin with Naaman, a successful commander of the army of the king, a great man in high favor with his master, a man to reckon with. That's how the narrator begins. We must see that this man is powerful in every way. So he paints a big picture for us. This is an important man, a 4-star general, the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, decorated for his military victories, a confidant of his king, one of the inner circle. When General Naaman spoke up in the war room, everybody listened. Naaman was somebody. But then the story shifts. It takes a turn. This man, though a mighty warrior, suffered from leprosy. The picture changes in our mind. All the greatness described at the start can't change this one terrible truth about him. He suffers from leprosy. A mighty warrior, but he's infected with a disease that's so devastating that his skin may seem to be rotting off its bones. In Naaman's time, leprosy was believed to be a physical manifestation of spiritual or moral transgression. It was a curse from a god, marking someone as sinful, unworthy, not fit for polite society. Given the stigma of the disease, we must assume that this is wildly embarrassing for Naaman and his family and his king. After all, how is it possible for someone with prominence and stature, someone with authority and rank, to suffer from leprosy? It seems like an anomaly that a person so great would be brought so low in this way. We're not told what Naaman has tried in order to cure his disease prior to this episode. I wonder if he went through the stages of grief that are typical when we hear life-altering news. Maybe he was still in denial when that first blemish appeared on his skin. Or maybe he was angry that something like that would happen to a man like him. Or maybe he started an aggressive medical treatment plan with all the latest technologies, whatever they were then. Maybe he made sacrificial offerings to all of his gods. Maybe he consulted the local practitioners for folk remedies. He could see his situation worsening. The clock was ticking. Soon he would have to cover up and avoid people. Perhaps he was desperate enough to try anything anyone suggested. So then someone else enters the story, someone very different from the mighty warrior. She's a slave, a young girl who had been abducted when there was a raid on Israel. Mighty warriors were accustomed to such booty. They got gold and silver and chariots and horses and sometimes lots of slaves. They could have whatever they wanted. This slave girl had been carried from her home and now served Naaman's wife. She is as small as Naaman is big. The power he has is the power she lacks. Yet she is not silent. If only my Lord were with the prophet who's in Samaria, she told her mistress, he would cure him of his leprosy. Now we wonder, why did this young girl care about this man whose army carried her away from her parents and her own people? That's one question. But here's another. Why did Naaman and his king bother to listen to what a mere slave girl said? The text doesn't tell us those things, only that the king of Aram gave Naaman permission to go. So Naaman departs with lots of gifts and a letter of introduction to the king. He would need it when he passed into enemy territories. Their nations were at war with each other. But when the king of Israel reads the letter, he is distressed to the core. Am I God, he asks, that I could give life or death, that this king should send a word to me to cure a man of leprosy? Well, it doesn't occur to this king that he is not the center of attention here. This is between kings, he thought. The king of Aram is trying to trick me. He wants me to fail. Then he can punish me and my country even more. Enter the prophet Elisha. Stop tearing your clothes, he says to the king. You're not the only one around here, you know. Send the man to me so he may learn there's a true prophet in Israel, a true God that we worship. With that, the king backs out of the picture, covering his backside, I guess, because he had ripped his clothes to shreds. The mighty warrior and the chariots and the horses and the gifts of gold and silver head to Elisha's house. It's a humble house, but this is a great scene. Elisha's not impressed. He doesn't even come out of the house to admire the splendid entourage. He sends his servant out with a message for Naaman. Go wash 7 times in the Jordan and you will be clean. Well, Naaman isn't used to this. He is a man with authority. He's accustomed to speaking with kings, with his own king and the kings of other nations. Who does this Elisha think he is? Naaman has no intention of washing in the muddy Jordan. Are not Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? If this Israel's prophet is going to diss Naaman by not even coming out to meet him, well, Naaman will just diss his river, the Jordan. We're always seeking easy solutions and quick answers, aren't we? But at the same time, however, if something seems too easy, we don't trust it. It's a mixed message. We want an easy, uncomplicated life, but then we know life ain't easy. Worthwhile victories are hard won. When important things materialize too quickly, we get a little suspicious, waiting for the next shoe to drop. After all, if the good stuff in life is better when it's slow, made from scratch, and not rushed, how can we get an instant cure? Easy sometimes implies cheap, flimsy, or half-hearted. The easy answer is rarely the one the professor wants. The easy fix is not what the plumbers and contractors advise. The easy cure is elusive for doctors and patients. The truly good thing is worth the wait and the extra effort. That's the sort of paradox we find in today's reading from 2 Kings. Naaman is offered an easy, quick, cheap solution to his problem. But the larger implications mean a life of faith that is not as easy as it seems. Naaman travels a great distance and offers a handsome price for a remedy. Maybe you can understand his surprise when he's told it simply, wash and be clean. It is disappointing. It's downright offensive. He's tried everything, the latest miracle cures, and this guy Elisha, a prophet of a defeated country, just tells him through a messenger, not even face to face, that he has to bathe in the muddy Jordan. Really? The Jordan is the boundary between Naaman's country and Israel, between the victors and the defeated. To Naaman, the Jordan represents the tracks on which Elisha and his people occupy the wrong side. Elisha can't be serious, but he is. This is no expensive miracle cure. This is no grueling regimen. This is no flashy treatment. It is merely wash and be clean. It sounds like a lot of the prophets saying, repent, turn around, start over again, wash and be clean. This is the simplicity of faith. Naaman's cure sounds easy peasy, but he's not so sure. Much like the story of faith for the many of us, the difficult part for Naaman comes in humbling himself to submit to this cure, allowing himself to be changed by it. Once he dips into the faith that's available to him, Naaman emerges as a believer. In crossing this physical, spiritual, and emotional boundary, the physical boundary of warring countries, the emotional boundary of pride, he crosses over from unbelief to belief, from hubris to humility, from hopelessness to faith, and he emerges a new man, reborn and renewed. After his childish outburst, the mighty warrior had turned to go home, and that would have been the end of Naaman's story, except for his servants. Naaman's servants are horrified with their master's behavior. Father, they said, if the prophet had commanded you to do something difficult, would you not have done it? How much more when all he said to you was wash and be clean? Those servants know how to get to their master. Of course, he'd do something difficult if someone challenged him. He would be manly enough to do whatever. So surely he's brave enough, manly enough to wash in a muddy river. Well, with that, Naaman turned around, went down to the Jordan, and immersed himself 7 times. When he came out of the water that last time, he looked down at his hands and his feet, and his flesh was like the flesh of a young boy. But not one of the servants dared to say, "I told you so." They just rolled their eyes at each other. There would be no story without the servants, without the slave girl who spoke of God's prophet, without the servants who turned Naaman's pride around. The mighty warrior was made whole by the power of God and by the intervention of his servants. We could simply say it's a wonderful story, the kind of story you tell when you're sitting around the fire remembering God's mighty acts among our ancestors. But do you remember the rest of the story? After Naaman understood that he was healed, he went back to the holy man, and with his entourage, he stood before Elisha and said, "I now know beyond a shadow of a doubt that there is no God anywhere on earth other than the God of Israel. In gratitude, let me give you a gift." Elisha replied, "As God lives, the God whom I serve, I'll take nothing from you." Naaman tried his best to get him to take something, but he wouldn't do it. Apparently, Elisha thought God's good gifts are not for sale. "If you won't take anything," said Naaman, "let me ask you something. Give me a load of dirt, as much as a team of donkeys can carry, because I'm never again going to worship any God other than the God of Israel. I will kneel on this good earth. There's one thing for which I need God's pardon. When my master, leaning on my arm, enters the shrine of Rimmon and worships there, and I'm with him there, worshiping Rimmon with him, may you see to it that your God will forgive me for this?" Elisha said, "Everything will be all right. Go in peace." Naaman was a warrior and a foreigner in the land of Israel. Warriors are self-reliant, nation-proud. They know how to get things done, and they never show weakness. The warrior is one of the main male archetypes, not too different from the matriarch, the female archetype. Even men and women who never go to war must learn to do hard things in order to provide for and protect their families. It's a powerful part of experiencing their identity and knowing how to do whatever's needed for their larger purposes of life. Men and women find great resources, energy, and courage in themselves to live out those identities until they can't. No one is always and forever strong, self-reliant, successful, and dutiful. Everyone eventually knows defeat and weakness and failure. At some point, the strong man and the strong woman fails as a way to know oneself. Naaman needed to reach out for help. He needed healing, but only by going beyond his narrow, tribal view of himself could he get there. And even when he does, he's told things must be done in a certain way. And he resists because he wants to be in control. Does that sound familiar? I like to be in control, and I bet you do too. The prophet Elisha was a wise man. He knew that Naaman's healing and transformation were not simply about a cure for his leprosy. Naaman needed to submit, to know his weakness and dependence on others, to expand his view of who was connected to his life. He needed to get naked and humble, to let go and die to his old self, his old identity. Naaman resists the command to go to the Jordan River. His servants coax him into humility and submission. Naaman is healed of his leprosy, yes, but he's also healed of his singular warrior man identity. In his acceptance of his weakness and dependence on someone else, in his realization that he cannot live his whole life trusting only in himself, in his encounter with the God who is well beyond his control and manipulation, Naaman discovers his true healing. He's transformed into a whole man who can let go and trust God and trust others. May we become more like Naaman. Amen.